This is a Sitting Ringside with David Penzer. Quick Fix on Radio Influence.
Former WWE ring announcer and one of the only people other than myself who got to do this for a living, Justin Roberts. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but Chris was a good friend. I traveled with him. He lived in the same city as I did. Steve Regal, Fit Finley, two people that are very important to you, and a couple other guys. And we would socialize on our when we had time off with our families, and Chris and Nancy and the Grunge lived in the same city too, Peachtree City in Atlanta. So I saw a lot of things that he hid from the guys. Did you ever see anything when Chris was on the road towards the end that made you think that he was starting to maybe lose it a little bit? I know that you can never have foreseen what you did. I didn't either, but just that maybe he was starting to cave.
I mean, I always knew that he had two sides. I always knew that other side of him from the stuff that happened that I talk about, stuff that happened, at restaurants, even domestically when he was drinking, and, who knows what else he was doing. So I saw that savage side of him. I had dinner the other night with Bret Hart, and we were talking about that, and Bret had never seen that side of him. So some people did, some people didn't, but I knew that other side. It was pretty scary.
Yeah. It's funny because
I talk about.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I talk about even the stuff that he put me through. That was just some of it, but most of it, we were always very cordial, and he was very good to my family, which I talk about and tell stories in there. So it was weird. Everything about it was weird, and obviously very sad and awful.
It's fun. It's funny. None of it's funny, quite frankly, but it's ironic looking back because some of the people that were closest to him never saw it. Because I remember you're talking about talking to Bret Hart, that he never saw anything like that, and you did. I remember when this all went down, I was on the phone for hours with Chris Jericho, who was much closer to Chris Benoit than I was, and I was pretty close to him and his family, and he had never seen that. He was shocked, and I was telling him the stories about how they would both, Chris and Nancy would both go to Johnny Grunge and tell they'd have a fight. They'd each tell their side of the story. Johnny Grunge, to me, I think was the only person that they didn't feel that judged them, because Johnny Grunge was kind of a screw up, in a nice way, nicest guy in the world, but kind of a screw up. So I don't think that they felt like they judged him, but I think that Chris felt like anybody else, whether it was Bret or Chris Jericho or any of those guys, would judge him. So I think he hid it from his closest friends. And
the thing with Bret said that he was always very respectful of him, and I could totally picture what I think it would look like if Chris and Bret were hanging out, and I think that's part of it. Chris really respected Bret, and he wouldn't do that in front of Bret. He wouldn't do that in front of Jericho. I could see that.
Now, you heard the news. You already were suspicious, I assume, that he didn't show up, because we both know that Chris Benoit doesn't miss shows. But you heard the news. Tell me about how that was when Vince called you guys in that day at TV.
Vince was going to be addressing us later in the day. We had been in Corpus Christi at the arena all day, and there, of course, was a brand split at the time, and both brands were there, so everybody was there, and a lot of talent had come back. They were going to have a lot of cameos. It was going to be Vince's funeral, so there were going to be a lot of cameos on the show. So there's a lot of talent there that day. And towards the end of the day, when we were going to be getting ready to do the show, that's when we got called into the arena, and Vince got a mic and went in the ring and addressed us. And before he started talking, I saw some whispering, and after the whispering, people would, their faces would drop or their hands would cover their face, and I knew we weren't getting good news. And when he presented us with the information, it came off as if, to me at least, it came off as if police went there and found the three of them dead. So we, assumed that the three of them were murdered.
So
And
that
that's the information we got.
you didn't have any thought going through your mind that something wacko happened inside that house?
No. When it was presented that the police went over there and the three of them had been murdered, that to me was somebody murdered them.
It's interesting because I remember that day like it was yesterday. I'm sitting in my house right now, and I was taking a nap. My son, who's now 22 years old, woke me up and said, "Chris and Nancy and Daniel are dead." And you first wake up, you're kind of groggy, and I wasn't sure what I heard. And no matter what went through my head, I knew that whatever happened was nobody but two people in that house ending up with three people dead. There wasn't a doubt in my mind.
Sitting Ringside with David Penzer can be found on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, and RadioInfluence.com.